My father is no longer fit to lead this business. Effective today, he has no authority here.
You did not build this place. You only learned how to take it. Escort him out, now!
Do not make this more embarrassing than it already is, Daddy.
You took my office. You took my keys, but you will not take the truth.
The day my daughter tried to bury me, I was still standing beside the podium. Simone had just thanked every family that had trusted Carter Family Funeral Home for 50 years. Then she announced that grief had affected my memory. She said the board had placed me on emeritus status that morning and removed my access before I endangered the business my wife and I built. Nobody had asked me. Marcus signaled the security men near the chapel doors. Before they reached me, I stepped to the microphone and raised a yellow carbon copy. Simone, would you explain why Laverne Price's dead husband signed a certificate 3 months after he was buried in Tennessee? The room stopped breathing. My daughter said I was confused. My son-in-law called the paper obsolete. Then the side door opened, and a state examiner entered carrying a sealed records box. For 7 months, my family had told people I was too old to understand their new system. They forgot I had spent 50 years learning one rule. The dead cannot correct the paperwork. The living had better keep a copy. If you have ever been told your age made your truth easier to dismiss, stay with me. The room where my daughter tried to retire me had once been our living room. Back in 1975, Carter Family Funeral Home was a narrow brick house with a bad furnace and one borrowed hearse that stalled whenever the weather turned cold. Nadine and I lived upstairs because we could not afford anything else. When the phone rang after midnight, I went downstairs, pulled on my suit, and tried not to wake her. We opened because too many black families in our part of St. Louis knew what it felt like to walk into a place carrying grief and still be treated like a problem. Some were quoted one price on the telephone and another after the body arrived. Some were pushed towards services they could not afford. Some were spoken to slowly, as though sorrow had made them foolish. Nadine had no patience for that disrespect. She sat across from every family with a yellow legal pad, a pencil, and carbon paper. She wrote down what they asked for, what each item cost, and what could be removed if the bill was too high. When the arrangement was finished, she gave the family the yellow copy. "Give them something they can hold," she always said. The white copy stayed in our main file. The pink copy went into her reconciliation drawer. The yellow copy left with the family, usually tucked into a purse, a church folder, or a family Bible. I handled the preparation room and cemetery calls. Nadine handled nearly everything that required a person to sit still and listen. She remembered which widow took coffee with evaporated milk. She knew which pastor wanted the folded flag for a veteran presented before the final prayer. She called families a week after the funeral, not to sell anything, but to ask whether they were sleeping. There were winters when the furnace quit during visitation. Summers when I changed shirts 3 times before noon. Christmas dinner went cold because a hospital called before we finished grace. We did not become a community institution all at once. We became one family at a time. Simone grew up inside that rhythm. As a little girl, she colored funeral programs at the reception desk and knew better than to run in the chapel. By 12, she could answer the telephone without sounding frightened. By 16, she knew how to place tissues close enough for a grieving mother to reach, without making the gesture feel like pity. She was good with people in the way Nadine had been. Maybe better. When Simone earned her funeral director's license, I thought the future had arrived exactly as it should. She could speak at a church banquet, meet with a banker, comfort a widow, and remember the names of the grandchildren in the hallway. She kept the first newspaper article that mentioned me. It was a small piece about a black funeral director invited to train county staff on respectful care. The clipping stayed framed in her office for years. I believe that meant she understood what the business was for. Marcus came into the family with a different talent. He could look at 3 years of expenses and find the leak before lunch. He knew lenders, tax schedules, vendor contracts, and the language that made a weak quarter sound temporary. He did not know how to prepare a body. He understood money moving through a system. At first, that helped us. He replaced the typewriters. He organized payroll. He built a database that let us search contracts in seconds. Even Nadine agreed. Some things needed changing, but she drew one line. Scan whatever you want, she told him. The originals stay. Marcus smiled like a man who planned to revisit the disagreement. After Nadine died, nobody could stop him with one sentence. The changes came faster. A new hearse, a branding company, a second location in the county, plans for a celebration center with stone walls, a catering kitchen, and enough lighting to make every memorial look like television. Simone called it growth. Marcus called it survival. I called it expensive. That was when Simone began saying we could not look small. She said it when the county location lost money. She said it when Marcus ordered another vehicle. She said it when I asked why a funeral home needed a launch campaign. My granddaughter Nia was assigned to scan Nadine's old files. She was 19, studying accounting at community college and working our front desk between classes. She found the carbon copies charming. Simone called them clutter. Marcus said the paper could be destroyed after migration. Nia saved early scans on a purple drive labeled Grandma's Recipes, beside family photographs and Nadine's pound cake recipe. Nobody thought anything of it. They thought even less of the black notebook in my coat pocket. I had used the same 3 columns for decades. Received, prepared, released. Every person who came into our care left a trail through those columns. One afternoon, Simone saw me checking the notebook against the new system. Daddy, nobody runs a business out of a coat pocket anymore. I closed the book and put it back. She was right about one thing. Nobody ran the whole business from that notebook, but I had never met a computer that could remember a body it had never seen. The first contract that bothered me belonged to Arthur Price. I found it on a Tuesday morning in March while reviewing the pre-need report. His account had been marked performed, which meant the system claimed we had completed the services and the trust had released the money. I knew Arthur Price had moved to Tennessee. I also knew we had never received his body. I opened the black notebook in my coat pocket and checked the 3 columns. Received, prepared, released. His name appeared nowhere. That alone did not prove fraud. Records could be entered late. A family could transfer arrangements. A spelling error could place a person under another file. I had spent too many years correcting honest mistakes to accuse anyone before checking the work. So I checked. There was no first call from a hospital or family member. No removal authorization, no preparation log, no cemetery information, no obituary draft, no release form. According to the computer, we had performed a funeral that left no trace inside the building. Marcus came into my office carrying coffee and speaking before he sat down. Conversion error, he said. I had not told him what I found yet. That was the first thing that made me look at him differently. He said older contracts sometimes change status during migration. He talked about legacy fields, duplicate records, and software rules. He made a simple question sound impolite. I asked him to show me the original entry. He turned the monitor toward himself, clicked through 3 screens, and said the source document had been archived. Where? Off-site. Which site? He looked at me over the screen. Elijah, it is a database, not a cemetery plot. Marcus called me Elijah when he wanted the room to remember we were business partners. He called me Dad when he wanted something signed. I wrote Arthur Price's contract number in my notebook. Then I checked the contracts before and after it. 2 more had been marked, performed without preparation records. By lunch, I had found 5. Before I went home, I had 7 names on a yellow pad. The next morning, I placed the list in front of Simone. She read every name. Her face changed when she reached the 4th one, then settled before she looked up. Marcus said the migration created status errors. Marcus knew that before I told him what I found. She rubbed the edge of the paper with her thumb. You think that means something? I think it means he knew which question I was about to ask. Simone closed her office door. Then she did something that kept me from going to the state board. She asked for 30 days. She reminded me that the county location was struggling. She said 18 employees depended on payroll. She listed 3 families whose services were scheduled. She said, a public complaint could freeze accounts before we knew whether a crime had occurred. Then she mentioned her mother. Nobody wants Nadine's name dragged through an investigation over a software mistake. That sentence did what she intended. I gave her 30 days. I told myself I was giving my daughter time to correct a problem. What I gave Marcus was time to hide one. The first change came 3 days later. My password stopped working. Marcus said the company was resetting security. He promised credentials by afternoon. The afternoon became Friday. Friday became the following week. Printed reports disappeared from outside my office. The accounting clerk said Marcus had moved everything to digital review. Naya told me she had been instructed to stop scanning Nadine's index cards. Marcus said old duplicates created confusion. Janelle Brooks, who handled night calls, came to me near closing. She held the bound logbook against her chest. Mr. Carter, Marcus says we do not need this anymore. The pages recorded every call after regular hours. Janelle used purple ink because everyone else used black. Did he tell you to destroy it? He said to place it with the old files downstairs. I returned it to her. Keep writing. By April, Simone had begun explaining me to people. She told managers grief had affected my concentration. She mentioned I repeated questions during meetings. She told one pastor, I was having difficulty adjusting to the new system. Each statement contained a piece of truth. I repeated questions because nobody answered them. I missed one meeting because my blood pressure appointment ran late. I had trouble sleeping after Nadine died. None of that meant I could not understand a contract. At my next appointment, Dr. Celeste Vaughn asked why Simone had requested a copy of my cognitive screening. I had never authorized Simone to receive one. Dr. Vaughn folded her hands. Grief can disturb sleep and concentration, she said. It is not the same as losing the ability to understand a decision and its consequences. I left with a written assessment and a feeling I did not enjoy naming. My daughter was no longer preparing to answer my questions. She was preparing people not to believe the man asking them. I went to see Laverne Price in May. She lived in a brick bungalow near the church where Nadine and I married. Laverne opened the door before I knocked and told me I looked tired. I told her I had a question about Arthur's pre-need contract. She did not ask why. She walked to the dining room, opened the Bible, and removed a yellow carbon copy from between Psalms and Proverbs. The paper had softened at the folds, but the writing was clear. Arthur Price had purchased a $9,600 plan from us 12 years earlier. The contract number matched the first number I had written in my notebook. The status did not. Laverne showed me a funeral bill from Memphis. Arthur had died there after moving closer to their son. A funeral home in Tennessee had handled everything. Carter Family Funeral Home had never received his body, arranged his service, or paid a vendor on his behalf. Then I showed her the certificate Marcus had filed. Her name appeared beneath a statement saying our company had performed the services. Laverne studied the signature. That came from the arrangement form we signed when we bought the plans, she said. I never signed this. The signature was too clean. Same angle, same pressure, same small break in the final letter. It had been copied from an older page and placed on a newer one. Laverne folded her hands over the yellow carbon. My husband was buried in Memphis, she said. Your building never received him. I had spent weeks wondering whether I was looking at bad data. Now I was looking at a false statement attached to a dead man's money. I asked Laverne for permission to copy everything. She agreed on one condition. You tell me whether my own plan is still there. I promised I would. That promise became heavier 2 days later. Janelle met me behind the preparation room after the last family left. She brought the purple ink night call log and 3 boxes of transport authorizations. We checked the 7 names I had found. None appeared in her log. Then we checked the next 5 contracts that had been marked performed. Nothing. No hospital call. No nursing home release. No removal team. No preparation authorization. No clothing list. No cemetery delivery. Janelle rested one finger on the page. A funeral can be simple. she said. It cannot be invisible. 12 false records now crossed the nights she had worked. That frightened her. She had received her funeral director license less than a year earlier. If regulators believed she had participated in those services, her career could end before it properly began. I told her to keep the original log where Marcus could not reach it and make no changes. She looked toward the hallway. If I help you, I lose this job. If you do not, I said, you may lose the license with it. She nodded once. That was how Janelle made decisions. Quietly, then completely. The third piece came from Nia. She arrived at my house after dark, carrying the purple drive labeled Grandma's Recipes. Her hands shook when she placed it on my kitchen table. Mom says you are trying to close the business. I am trying to learn what happened. Dad says the old files are contaminated. Then why did he tell you to stop scanning them? She looked down. Nia had copied a contract list in January while testing the new indexing system. She had saved it beside family photographs and Nadine's pound cake recipe because the office server had been running slowly. The January list contained 684 active contracts. The current list contained 638. 46 contracts had disappeared. We compared the missing numbers with my notebook, Janelle's log, and Nadine's index cards. Some belonged to people who were still alive. Others had died in different states. Several families had transferred their arrangements years earlier. Every missing contract had been marked, performed before it vanished from the report. Nia stared at the screen. If it was only a mistake, why did Dad need the old version gone? I did not answer for Marcus. I called Aisha Monroe the next morning. Aisha had helped Nadine update our corporate records years before. She listened without interrupting, then told me not to take another document from the building. Anything already in your lawful possession, preserve it, she said. Anything else, let the process reach it. She sent a formal preservation notice to the company, the server provider, and Gateway Fiduciary Bank. That was when the numbers stopped looking like mistakes and started looking like a plan. Renee Walsh, the trust officer, matched the 46 missing contracts to release requests submitted over 18 months. Each request included a certificate saying the services had been completed. Each certificate carried Simone's provider approval. Most carried a family signature copied from an older form. Gateway had released $783,200. $360,000 had gone to support the failing county location. $250,000 had become the deposit on the new celebration center. $103,200 had paid for vehicles, advertising, and the new brand campaign. $70,000 had covered payroll and overdue vendors. Marcus had not stolen the money and hidden it offshore. He had spent it where everyone could see. That made the lie easier to defend. He called it keeping the company alive. Simone called it protecting the legacy. Aisha called it what it was. Family money and trust money are not the same money, she said. Calling it temporary does not change who it belongs to. There was more. The county location carried a balloon payment of $920,000 due in early November. Marcus had personally guaranteed most of it. Their only escape was a $3,800,000 refinance. The lender wanted a clean annual report, stable leadership, and no undisclosed regulatory problem. Nia's backup contained one more file. Marcus had named it Clean Contract List. It removed the same 46 contracts. The file was created the night after I gave Simone my first 7 names. Then Aisha found the email. Simone had written, "We cannot look small in front of the lender. Clear Daddy from the report before the anniversary." I read that sentence 3 times. My daughter was not preparing people to doubt me because she feared I was losing my memory. She needed the lender to believe I no longer had a voice. The preservation notice reached the funeral home Monday. By noon, Marcus had called an emergency board meeting. I was sitting in Dr. Vaughn's office when Simone and Marcus used their combined shares to remove me from daily management. They could not take my ownership, my license, or my right to report what I had found. They could take my office keys, email, and the authority employees had been trained to recognize. Simone called before I reached the parking lot. "Daddy, this is temporary. Temporary has become an expensive word in our family. We are protecting the operation until the facts are clear. The facts were clear enough to lock me out. She ended the call without saying goodbye. When I returned, my nameplate was gone. 2 cardboard boxes held my reading glasses, 3 neckties, a photograph of Nadine, and the brass letter opener my father gave me. The black notebook was missing. I found it in the bottom drawer before Marcus could finish telling me I no longer had authorization to enter the office. He stood in the doorway. This is why the board acted. You do not respect boundaries. I built the boundaries. And you think that means every rule still belongs to you. I slipped the notebook into my coat. The rules about other people's money never belonged to me. That afternoon, the staff received an email announcing my transition to emeritus status. It thanked me for 5 decades of service and said grief-related health concerns required rest. By evening, 3 pastors had called. The third hesitated before asking whether I still recognized him. That question hurt more than losing my keys. Simone weakened my reputation with 4 polite paragraphs. Dr. Vaughn prepared a written assessment stating that I understood my finances, professional obligations, the dispute, and the consequences of my decisions. Capacity is not the absence of age, she said. It is the ability to understand the choice in front of you. The choice grew uglier by the day. Janelle's hours were cut from full-time to 3 shifts. Marcus called it seasonal adjustment. We had never made seasonal adjustments in October. Nia came to my house carrying 2 shirts and her accounting textbook. Marcus had threatened to stop paying her tuition if she shared another company file. She tried to laugh. I guess I should have picked a cheaper major. You are not choosing between me and your parents. It feels like everybody already chose for me. I told her she could stay. I did not tell her I had called the college financial aid office. 2 days later, Aisha learned Marcus had scheduled the basement files for destruction after the anniversary. The work order called them duplicate records, already captured digitally. Aisha sent another preservation notice. The shredding company canceled. Marcus told the staff outside lawyers were interfering with normal record retention. He had a professional phrase for every dangerous thing he did. Then the anniversary invitations arrived. The cover showed the renovated building with the Carter name in gold. Inside was a photograph of Simone and Marcus beneath the words, "A New Generation of Care." My photograph appeared on the final page beside Nadine's. The caption thanked us for our past service. Paused. I was licensed. Still an owner. Still alive. Simone had written my obituary before asking whether I planned to die. A local business reporter repeated that I was voluntarily stepping back after grief and health challenges. The article praised Simone for guiding a sensitive family transition. Nobody called me. The lender received the same story. Stable succession. Unified leadership. No material dispute. Aisha said the refinance had not closed. The anniversary was part of the lender's final review. They wanted to see community leaders treating Simone as the undisputed successor. That event is not a celebration, I said. No, Aisha replied. It is evidence they are manufacturing. The following evening, Simone asked to meet alone in the chapel. She sat beneath the stained glass Nadine had chosen. A falda rested beside her. My shares would keep their value. My insurance would continue. The Carter name would remain on the new building. A portrait of Nadine and me would hang in the lobby. I would receive monthly consulting payments without working. In return, I would sign a statement saying the contract discrepancies began under the paper system I managed. The false performance records would be described as transition errors. I read it twice. It never used the word fraud. It never used Marcus's name. It said Simone discovered the problem. You want me to confess to something you did. I want you to help me keep this place open. By telling 46 families their records failed because I got old, we can restore the money after the refinance. You already had 30 days. I needed more. You used more. She stood. If this becomes public, employees lose jobs, families lose contracts. Mother's name gets dragged through every newspaper in Missouri. Your mother left families copies because she knew a business could fail them. This business was her life. No, it was her work. There is a difference. Simone raised her voice. You would burn down 50 years to prove you are still in charge. I am not trying to stay in charge. Then sign it. I closed the folder. No. Her anger disappeared. What replaced it was colder. If you come to the anniversary, security will remove you. I asked one question. Do you remember who taught you never to sell a widow something she did not need? Her eyes moved toward the stained glass. She did not answer. The next morning, Aisha filed the complaint with every supporting record we could lawfully provide. Daniel Holt moved the examination forward after learning about the shredding and server migration. Renee prepared certified trust releases. Janelle agreed to testify. Laverne was already invited as one of our longest-standing families. An independent funeral director agreed to assume temporary control if needed. I took my suit from the closet. Nadine had chosen it for the 40th anniversary. The black notebook went into the breast pocket. Laverne's yellow copy went inside my jacket. I carried no speech. I was not going to keep my office, title, or name on a wall. I was going because 6 families had funerals scheduled, 18 employees had done nothing wrong, and 46 promises were about to disappear beneath a clean report. My daughter believed security could remove me from the building. She had not understood that the building was no longer where the truth was being kept. The chapel was full before I reached the front doors. Families sat beside bankers, pastors, neighborhood leaders, and reporters from 2 local stations. Simone had arranged every chair to face the new stage. Behind it hung a screen showing photographs from 50 years of Carter funerals, church programs, military honors, and families holding hands beside open caskets. My wife's face appeared every few minutes. That was the part Simone had not understood. You can use a dead woman's picture in a presentation. You cannot make her agree with you. A young employee opened the door for me, then looked toward Marcus as though he needed permission to let me enter. I walked in anyway. Simone was already at the microphone. She wore Nadine's silver brooch and spoke with the calm voice she used when a family had not yet accepted bad news. She thanked the community. She thanked Marcus. She thanked the lender for believing in the next generation. Then she thanked me for recognizing that grief and age had made retirement necessary. A few people turned toward me. Marcus moved his hand. The 2 security men near the chapel doors stepped forward. I reached the podium before they reached me and raised Laverne's yellow carbon copy. Simone, would you explain why Laverne Price's dead husband signed a certificate 3 months after he was buried in Tennessee? The room went still. Simone looked at the paper, then at me. Daddy, you are confusing 2 different files. Laverne rose from the second row. My husband was buried in Memphis. Your building never received him. She walked to the front and placed her carbon copy beside the certificate Aisha had obtained from the trust records. Daniel Holt entered through the side door carrying a sealed box. He set it on the front table and asked Marcus to produce the original submission record. Marcus smiled without showing any warmth. This appears to be an isolated conversion error. Holt broke the seal on the box. Then the original record should make that easy to prove. That was the first layer. One false certificate could still be blamed on a careless employee, a damaged scan, or a mislabeled transfer. Marcus had built his defense around that possibility. Janelle removed it. She stepped from the aisle holding the bound night call log. The purple ink was visible even from where I stood. A funeral can be simple, she said. It cannot be invisible. She opened the log to Arthur Price's date. There was no call. She turned to the transport authorizations. No removal. She showed the preparation ledger. No body received, embalmed, dressed, viewed, or released. Marcus said the paper records had failed to synchronize with the digital system. I took the black notebook from my coat. No first call. No preparation. No release. 4 separate records. And none of them contain his name. Holt looked towards Simone. This is not a status error. This certificate describes work for which there is no operational trace. The security men stopped moving. That was the second layer. Renee Walsh opened a second folder. She had spent 31 years working with trusts, and she spoke the way bankers do when the number matters more than the room. Gateway released funds on 46 certificates submitted by this provider. A murmur moved through the chapel. The total was $783,200. The screen behind Simone still showed our history. A photograph appeared of Nadine handing a folded flag to a widow. Simone gripped the edge of the podium. The money was moved temporarily to protect the company. Every dollar would have been restored after refinancing. Aisha stood beside Renee. Family money and trust money are not the same money. Calling it temporary does not change who it belongs to. Laverne looked at my daughter. You did not borrow from an account. You borrowed from the day my children will have to bury me. Nobody moved after that. Holt announced that Carter Family Funeral Home could accept no additional pre-need funds until the examination was complete. That was the third layer. Marcus stepped toward the microphone and began speaking about liquidity pressure, system migration, and incomplete legacy records. He was trying to make theft sound like weather. Naya walked down the aisle carrying the purple drive. Her mother whispered her name as a warning. Naya placed the drive beside Holt's box. If it was only a mistake, why did Dad need the old version gone? Marcus said she had copied confidential data without authorization. Aisha answered before he could build the accusation. She created those scans during the work your office assigned her, months before her access was removed. Holt opened the archived report. The earlier list contained all 684 contracts. Marcus's clean version removed the same 46 accounts that generated the false releases. The file history showed the device, the account, and the hour it was created. Marcus looked at Simone. She was the license provider. Nothing was released without her approval. That was the fourth layer. My daughter stared at him as though the betrayal had just begun. It had not. It had begun the first time they decided a promise could be repaid later. Aisha held the final page but did not read it. I looked at Simone. Tell them why you removed me. She glanced at the lender, the pastors, and the camera near the rear wall. I was trying to save what you and Mama built. Marcus stepped away from her and said she had ordered him to clear me from the report. Simone turned. You said the refinance would replace everything before the examination. I asked Aisha to read the email. She did. We cannot look small in front of the lender. Clear Daddy. From the report before the anniversary. The words belonged to Simone. So did the plan. I told the room I had found the first discrepancies in March. I told them I had given my daughter 30 days because I wanted to protect her license and her mother's name. That delay was mine, I said. I gave her time to correct the truth, and she used it to bury the evidence. Simone's face changed then, not into innocence, into the knowledge that I would no longer carry the part she had chosen. For the first time that evening, the room was not looking at me as an old man interrupting a ceremony. They were looking at the records Simone had tried to outlive. If somebody has ever called control protection and expected you to be grateful for it, share this story with the person who needs their own copy of the truth. Marcus asked whether I wanted 18 employees and 6 grieving families punished for a temporary decision. I did not. That was the only reason I had not asked Holt to close the doors. An independent funeral director was waiting in the rear office. She would assume temporary control. The 6 scheduled funerals would continue. Employees who had not participated would keep working. The celebration center would be sold if that was what restoring the trust required. Simone asked whether I would really strip the Carter name from the future. I looked at Nadine's photograph on the screen. No one gets to use her name to protect what she would have stopped. Renee froze further releases, and the emergency management agreement removed Simone and Marcus from access while Holt documented the restriction for the state board. Aisha handed the lender the preserved report and the complaint. I stepped away from the podium. I did not ask for my office back. I did not ask anyone to stand for me. The families had kept their copies. For that night, that was enough. The examination lasted 4 months. Daniel Holt did not arrest anyone in the chapel. He sealed records, restricted access, and began the slower work of proving which documents had been changed, who approved them, and where every dollar went. The funeral home remained open under an independent director named Marcia Green. She had no family connection to us and no patience for excuses. The 6 funerals already scheduled were completed without interruption. Janelle kept her position and took over the night call rotation. We stopped selling new pre-need contracts. Every affected family received a letter explaining that their agreement was under review. They were given a verified balance, the right to transfer their plan, and the name of an independent contact who did not work for Carter Family Funeral Home. Some families stayed, some did not. I could not blame either group. The celebration center was sold before the renovation was finished. The county location followed. The proceeds, our insurance coverage, and the remaining equity held by Simone and Marcus were used to restore the trust. It took nearly a year to make every contract whole. Marcus lost management authority immediately. His personal guarantee pulled him into bankruptcy proceedings, and the state began reviewing his registration as a pre-need agent. Investigators referred portions of the file for possible criminal charges, but I learned not to predict what a prosecutor would do before the evidence had finished speaking. Simone's funeral director license was suspended while the board considered the false certificates and her role in the reporting. She was not led away in handcuffs. She went home, hired counsel, and entered a process that moved by notices, hearings, and deadlines. That was less dramatic than the chapel. It was also more real. I gave a sworn statement that included my own delay. I told the examiner I found the first 7 contracts in March and gave my daughter 30 days before reporting them. Aisha had warned me that admitting that could expose me to discipline. I admitted it anyway. Protecting the truth only after it becomes safe is another kind of lie. The board issued me a formal reprimand for failing to report the irregularities promptly. I kept my license, but the finding became part of my record. I deserved that part. Janelle was cleared. 6 months later, Marcia recommended her for the permanent manager position. Janelle accepted only after the new owners agreed that every family would receive paper and electronic copies of every funded agreement. Naya moved back with her parents after the investigation began. She stayed in college with grants, a small loan, and money I offered without conditions. She finished the year studying accounting. I never asked her to save the Carter name. She had already saved the records. The business continued under a different ownership group. The Carter name remained on older documents, but it came down from the main sign. Watching workers remove those gold letters hurt more than I expected. For 50 years, I had thought a family name on a building meant the promise would outlive me. I had been wrong. A name could remain while the promise underneath it disappeared. Simone left one voicemail near Christmas. She did not ask forgiveness. She said she had believed the refinance would close, the money would return, and no family would ever know. She said every decision, after the first one had been made to prevent the first decision from destroying us. Then she said, "I thought I was saving what you built." I listened twice. I did not call her back. There are apologies that begin with regret and apologies that begin with an explanation. I was not ready to pretend they were the same. Laverne received written confirmation that her full contract remained protected. She placed the new letter beside the yellow copy in her Bible. When she showed me, she said, "Now, my children will not have to argue with anybody while they are grieving." That was the first moment after the anniversary when I felt something had truly been repaired. Not the building, not the brand, a promise. That was the only legacy I still had any honest right to claim. 1 year after the anniversary, the verification letters went out. Each family received a statement showing what had been restored, where money was held, and whom to call if anyone tried to change the agreement again. Laverne placed hers beside the yellow carbon copy in her Bible. The celebration center never opened under our name. It was sold to a nonprofit that turned the building into a grief support center, with meeting rooms, a chapel, and offices for families who could not afford counseling. There was no Carter sign outside. For once that felt right. I spent Thursday evenings teaching apprentices at community college. On the first night, I placed yellow carbon paper at every seat. I told them computers were faster. I told them digital records could protect families better than any filing cabinet if honest people managed them. Then I told them speed was not the same as trust. Always leave the family with a record they control, I said. Nobody should have to ask the business accused of failing them for the only copy of the truth. Naya quietly attended class. She was still studying accounting. I never asked her to become a funeral director, and she never apologized for choosing a different life. After students left, Aisha brought me the last box from Nadine's files. Inside was a bank statement, an application, and a handwritten note. 3 months before she died, Nadine had placed $48,000 of her savings into a scholarship fund for students who wanted to serve communities without enough funeral professionals. The account had grown to more than $60,000. She had refused to name it after either of us. Her note said, "Do not put our name on it. Put the promise on it." The first recipient of the Last Promise Scholarship was a young woman from East Street, Lewis, who had no connection to my family. That was when I finally understood what Nadine had known before the rest of us. A name can come down from a building. A promise only disappears when the living decide not to keep it.